Hi everybody, welcome to day 25. We are reading in Matthew chapter 17 today, and we have some great passages to work through. So at the beginning of chapter 17, we see the story of the Transfiguration of Jesus. And so Jesus goes up to the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and what they describe is basically Jesus shining like the sun, and not that he's forming into another person or creature or anything like that. It's still Jesus in his human form, but he is shining like the sun. And what is kind of miraculous about that is not the fact that you see his glory shining, but if we think about it in a reverse perspective, what we need to think about is he spent 33 years on the earth keeping his glory from shining every day, all day. And so kind of the miraculous part in that is that he is able to keep it from shining throughout. And this story, I think, is included in Matthew for a few reasons. One is that Peter, James, and John are exposed to Jesus as the Messiah again, because with the Transfiguration comes an appearance of Moses and Elijah, who represent the law and the prophets of the Old Testament. And then Peter is saying, we need to create these tabernacles for you, these booths. And God speaks from a cloud and says, "This is my beloved Son." And of course, the disciples fall down on their face and are terrified, because now they're not just looking at people who are walking the earth, they're listening to the voice of God. And of course, that should provoke some kind of reverence and fear from us. And so then he talks about Elijah, and because there's this piece in the Old Testament about how Elijah is going to come first. And so Jesus says Elijah's already come and you didn't even recognize him. And so he's referring to John the Baptist. And most scholars believe it's not that Elijah came as like a new person, more that John the Baptist came in the work and spirit of Elijah. So he was Elijah's parallel, just like we were just talking about yesterday about Jesus paralleling his death and resurrection to Jonah and the big fish. John the Baptist is that parallel to Elijah and doing the same kind of work in that same spirit. And he was coming before the Messiah to announce him and prepare the way. And so Jesus was saying, Elijah and the spirit of Elijah has been here and y'all just didn't recognize him. So then it talks about Jesus healing a boy who has a demon, and they relate it back to more like a seizure and possibly even epilepsy. But this demon, they say, we've asked the disciples and they cannot do it. And so Jesus, of course, steps in and shows that even where we fail, he will not fail. And I think that's an important point for us to remember, that it's not just about, he is going to talk about faith like a mustard seed, and one of those famous verses right there. But I think first we want to note that where the disciples failed and where we will fail, Jesus does not fail. And that is an awesome thing for us to understand and know. And then the second point that he talks about is that faith like a mustard seed. And a mustard seed is super, super tiny, if you've ever seen one before. And he says, even if you'll have faith like a mustard seed, you can move that mountain and nothing would be impossible for you. And it's not to say that having a little faith won't do great things. Little faith could do great things, but a great faith could do greater things. So we continue in our scriptures, and we continue to pray, and we continue to grow in our faith so that we can do great things to glorify him. And then it briefly mentions Jesus foretells his death and resurrection again. And these are just so quick and so short, but we understand too that the disciples can't fully grasp what he's saying as he's describing what's going to happen, because it even says they were saddened by this. And if, hindsight 2020, we know on this side that what the death and resurrection meant and that it was going to happen, or that it happened, whereas they were not understanding that Jesus was going to die and come back. And so for them, it was sad. And we get to have that hope on this side of the resurrection. As it wraps up chapter 17, we get this story about the temple tax. And so this is not unusual. A temple tax was normal for every Jewish man to pay. And they're asking, does Jesus not pay the temple tax? And Peter, of course, stands up for him and says, well, yeah, he does. But Jesus, what he's telling us in this story and in this scripture is that he's relating it back to this idea that, well, if you have a son, the son's not going to pay the temple tax, and rabbis don't pay the temple tax, and they would be exempt from that. And so Jesus is saying, the temple is for my Father. I am the Son, so I shouldn't have to pay the temple tax. But what we find from him is in this verse that says, so that we don't offend them, we're going to pay the temple tax anyway. And he doesn't only pay the temple tax, he pays Peter's, and he does it in a miraculous way by saying, go throw a hook and a line and go catch this fish, and in the fish will be a shekel in its mouth, so that it'll pay our temple tax for us. And so just another awesome story of how Jesus worked miracles, but also showed who he was as the Son of God, and that he was going to be able to do great things. And I think one of the things that I loved the most here was that he was saying, we're going to, even though I don't have to do this, we're going to do it because I don't want to offend anyone, and I want to make sure that they understand that I'm not breaking any laws or rules that they have set in place. And I think that's important for us as Christians to understand too, that sometimes there are things that are permissible for us to do, but I think if we understand that it's going to offend somebody, then that might be something that we take a step back from, and we don't partake in that, whatever that might be that might offend somebody. And so I think that's important for us to understand. As we wrap up today, I'm just praying for you to have faith as small as a mustard seed, but even greater, so that great things can happen and we can glorify him. Y'all have a great day today. Bye.